out their front door when
You're good. Come on now. Hands up. Put your hands up.
Back up. All right, go to your knees. Put your hands behind your back.
On the night of June 22nd, 2024, Tampa, Florida, was alive with music, flashing lights, and crowded clubs packed with people celebrating the start of summer. Among them was Jacksonville rapper Julio Foolio, whose real name was Charles Jones. Just hours earlier, he had posted his location online, telling fans exactly where he would be celebrating his birthday weekend. To the people around him, it looked like a normal night. Friends laughing, music blasting through the city, phones recording everything for Instagram. But somewhere in the background, other people were watching too. According to prosecutors, while Julio moved between clubs in Tampa, several men connected to a rival Jacksonville gang were already tracking his movements in real time. Surveillance footage and phone records would later show vehicles moving quietly through parking lots near Teaser's nightclub, then Truth 18, and eventually near the Home2 Suites hotel, where Julio and his friends planned to stay for the night. Men in hoodies, cars sitting in darkness, phones constantly ringing between different locations. Police later alleged this was not random surveillance. It was coordinated hunting. By around 4:30 in the morning, Julio's Dodge Charger pulled into the Home2 Suites parking lot. Security cameras captured him stepping out with friends, completely unaware that armed men were already waiting nearby in the shadows. Then, the shooting started. Gunfire exploded across the parking lot as multiple shooters rushed forward carrying AR-style rifles and Glock pistols equipped with extended magazines. Muzzle flashes lit up the darkness. Bullets tore through parked cars, shattered windows, and ripped into Julio's vehicle with overwhelming force. People screamed and ran for cover. Two cars crashed into each other, trying to escape. And in the middle of the chaos, Julio Foolio was hit multiple times inside the Dodge Charger. By the time the gunfire stopped, the shooters had already disappeared into the night. But as homicide detectives began piecing together surveillance footage, phone records, Airbnb rentals, and GPS data, investigators would come to believe something terrifying. This was not a spontaneous drive-by shooting. According to prosecutors, the attack had been carefully planned for days by multiple suspects working together across several locations in Tampa. They didn't just find him, they hunted him, and by sunrise, one of Florida's most dangerous gang wars had just claimed its biggest victim.
Tampa investigators say 5 people came down from Jacksonville and worked together to follow and ultimately kill a rapper who was here celebrating his birthday. 4 of those suspects appeared in court today.
To understand why prosecutors believe Julio Foolio was targeted so aggressively that night, you first have to understand where he came from. Julio Foolio, whose real name was Charles Jones, grew up in Jacksonville, Florida, a city that had already developed a reputation for some of the deadliest gang violence in the state. Long before the music videos, social media fame, and viral diss tracks, violence was already a normal part of life around him. According to people who knew him, Julio grew up witnessing shootings, retaliation, and funerals from a very young age. In many neighborhoods connected to Jacksonville's street culture, losing friends to violence became almost routine. And over time, that reality started shaping both his identity and his music. As a teenager, Julio began building attention online through drill rap, an aggressive style of music heavily tied to real street conflicts. His songs often mocked rivals, referenced dead enemies, and openly discussed shootings connected to Jacksonville gang culture. While the music helped him gain millions of views online, it also made him one of the most controversial and recognizable figures in Florida's drill rap scene. Eventually, Julio became heavily associated with 6 Block, a group publicly linked to an ongoing rivalry with members connected to ATK and 1200. The conflict played out both in real life and online. Diss tracks, Instagram Live insults, and public threats became constant between both sides. But the danger around Julio wasn't just internet drama. Months before his death, he had already survived another ambush in Jacksonville, when gunmen opened fire on his car with high-powered rifles. Even after escaping that attack, Prosecutors say the threats never stopped, and as his fame continued growing, so did the target on his back. Because in Jacksonville's drill rap war, visibility often came with consequences.
If 3 of your brothers die in your arms, don't that mean a nigga play with you?
Hey Charles, I'm gonna show you wrist.
Hey, cuz, stop saying that, cuz.
I'm gonna show you, Charles. I'm gonna show you, boy, on God.
Pulling up, they could have seen, knocking off his top. Bullets through this windshield, can't miss.
By the time Julio Foolio was killed in Tampa, the violence between Jacksonville's rival groups had already been building for years. According to prosecutors, the conflict centered around several interconnected groups, including 6 Block, the side Julio was closely associated with, and rival factions tied to ATK and 1,200. What made this war especially disturbing was how deeply it blended real violence with music, internet culture, and public humiliation. The feud stretched back to at least 2018, when a series of retaliatory killings began escalating across Jacksonville. Over the years, names like Spaz, Bibby, Tilly, and Jake Jitt became more than just victims in police reports. They became symbols used by rival groups to mock, threaten, and provoke each other online. And eventually, the music became part of the violence itself. Songs like Who I Smoke shocked millions of people online because they openly referenced dead rivals in catchy drill music videos. Opposing rappers responded with their own diss tracks, including songs like Game Over, where enemies were mocked after being killed. Prosecutors later argued that the music reflected a cycle of retaliation that was no longer staying on the streets alone. It was spreading across the internet. Instagram live broadcasts became public taunting sessions. Story posts appeared only hours after shootings. Gang members and affiliates turned murders into viral content, where disrespect and humiliation spread faster than fear. And as the online attention grew, so did the pressure for retaliation. To outsiders, some of the videos looked almost unreal: young men dancing, laughing, and making music, while referencing actual killings connected to active gang investigations. But behind the views, lyrics, and social media posts were grieving families, real funerals, and neighborhoods trapped in constant violence. Because in Jacksonville's drill culture, death was no longer just revenge. It had become entertainment.
Let's look at the evidence of the heightened level of premeditation. These 4 defendants, by June 6th, the evidence tells us, had already planned, had already conspired, were already teaming up to snatch Charles Jones' life from him. June 6th, you recall this? The X Spaces discussion that was going on between Isaiah Chance and the victim in this case, Charles Jones.
According to prosecutors, the attack that killed Julio Foolio did not begin in the parking lot of the Home2 Suites hotel. It began hours earlier, online. On June 22, 2024, Julio posted videos and photos on Instagram showing he was celebrating his birthday weekend in Tampa. To fans, the posts looked normal: music, nightlife, friends, expensive cars. But investigators later argued those same posts may have unintentionally exposed his location to the people already searching for him. Within a short time, multiple suspects connected to Jacksonville reportedly began traveling toward Tampa. Court records later showed that Rashad Murphy rented an Airbnb for the group using his real identification, leaving behind a digital trail investigators would eventually trace back to him. Prosecutors say the Airbnb became a temporary staging location for the operation. And according to surveillance footage presented in court, the suspects did not arrive empty-handed. Authorities allege that Sean Gathright and Isaiah Chance were later seen loading weapons and bags into vehicles before leaving Jacksonville. Among the firearms prosecutors say were used in the attack were AR-style rifles and Glock pistols equipped with extended magazines, capable of firing dozens of rounds rapidly. Then the convoy moved south toward Tampa. Multiple vehicles traveled separately. Phones stayed active between different locations. And according to detectives, the suspects appeared to coordinate movements throughout the night. When they reached the Airbnb, investigators say the group behaved carefully. Surveillance footage reportedly showed individuals avoiding visible security cameras and entering through the rear of the property rather than the front entrance where a ring camera was installed. To homicide detectives, that detail mattered because it suggested awareness, preparation, an effort to avoid identification before the shooting even happened. But perhaps the most disturbing part came next. Instead of immediately attacking Julio, prosecutors believe the suspects spent hours tracking him across Tampa. One vehicle reportedly drove to Teaser's nightclub long before Julio arrived, possibly scouting the area and learning nearby exits. Detectives later reconstructed movements, showing suspects appearing near multiple locations connected to Julio throughout the night, including Truth 18 and eventually the Home2 Suites hotel. Phone records and messages later revealed efforts to gather live information about Julio's location through other people connected to the nightlife scene. According to prosecutors, some suspects repeatedly asked where Julio was going next and who he was with. They weren't waiting for chance. They were following him, and despite what investigators say was already being planned, parts of the night still looked strangely normal on surveillance footage. At one point before the shooting, some of the suspects reportedly stopped at McDonald's for food. Security cameras captured them ordering meals, standing casually, and behaving like ordinary young men out late at night. Then they got back into their vehicles and continued hunting. That contrast would later disturb investigators deeply, because according to prosecutors, these were not men acting in sudden panic or uncontrollable rage. The movements appeared controlled, coordinated, methodical, vehicle positioning, tracking locations, communication between groups, weapons prepared in advance. By the time Julio Foolio finally arrived at the Home2 Suites parking lot around 4:30 in the morning, prosecutors believed the suspects already knew exactly where he would be. This was no longer a spontaneous act of street violence. According to investigators, it had become something far colder, something organized, something planned. This wasn't a random shooting anymore. It was a mission. By late Saturday night, Tampa's nightclub district was packed with music, alcohol, and hundreds of people moving between clubs across the city. Inside Teaser's nightclub, Julio Foolio celebrated his birthday surrounded by friends, cameras, and flashing lights. Videos posted online showed him laughing, drinking, and enjoying the night as fans recognized him throughout the club. But according to prosecutors, he wasn't the only one watching those videos. Not far away, investigators say several rival gang associates were already tracking his movements in real time. Vehicles connected to the suspects reportedly appeared near the club long before Julio arrived. Surveillance footage later reviewed by detectives showed cars slowly entering parking lots, sitting idle for long periods, then quietly repositioning as the night continued. Inside one of the vehicles, prosecutors allege phones were constantly active. Messages, location updates, calls between different groups. This wasn't random movement. Authorities believe it was coordinated surveillance. At some point during the night, Julio and his group left Teasers and headed toward another location called Truth 18. Detectives later pieced together phone records and security footage suggesting the suspects followed shortly afterward. One detail especially stood out to investigators. According to witness testimony and surveillance footage referenced during court proceedings, Isaiah Chance was reportedly seen wearing a mask and hoodie despite the Florida summer heat. Prosecutors argued it was another sign the group already anticipated violence long before the shooting started. Meanwhile, Julio continued moving through the city completely unaware of what prosecutors say was unfolding around him. To him, this was still just a birthday weekend. Music, friends, another late night in Tampa. But sometime after 4 o'clock in the morning, the night finally began slowing down. Julio and several friends returned to the Home2 Suites hotel parking lot around 4:30 a.m. Security cameras later captured the Dodge Charger pulling into the lot as people stepped out, exhausted after hours of partying, and hidden nearby, the ambush team was already waiting. According to investigators, a black Chevrolet Impala connected to the suspects had positioned itself near the hotel shortly before Julio arrived. Prosecutors believe several armed men remained inside or nearby preparing weapons while watching the parking lot carefully. Then everything changed. Within seconds, multiple gunmen rushed forward from the darkness carrying AR-style rifles and handguns equipped with extended magazines. And suddenly, the parking lot exploded with gunfire. Automatic rounds tore through the air, muzzle flashes lit up parked vehicles, glass shattered across the pavement. Witnesses later described hearing what sounded like a war zone erupting outside the hotel. Some people immediately dropped to the ground. Others ran blindly through the parking lot trying to escape the bullets ripping through nearby cars. Then investigators say the shooters focused directly on Julio's Dodge Charger. Round after round slammed into the vehicle with overwhelming force. Inside the car, chaos. People screaming, trying to duck, trying to escape. But there was almost nowhere to go. According to prosecutors, Julio Foolio was struck multiple times as gunfire tore through the Charger from several directions. Investigators later recovered dozens of shell casings scattered across the parking lot, evidence of just how overwhelming the attack had been. Witnesses described hearing continuous bursts of rapid gunfire echoing through the hotel complex in the middle of the night. Some vehicles crashed while attempting to flee. Others sat frozen in place as bullets shattered windows and pierced doors nearby. And the danger extended far beyond Julio himself. 3 other people were wounded during the ambush, including individuals inside nearby vehicles. One bullet reportedly traveled through part of the hotel and entered a room where a family with children was staying. That detail would later horrify investigators, because by that point, prosecutors argued the shooters were firing so aggressively that innocent people nearby had become collateral damage. Meanwhile, security cameras captured the gunman moving quickly through the parking lot, with what detectives described as coordinated movements. Prosecutors later argued the suspects appeared to know exactly where they were going, where Julio's car was located, and how they planned to escape afterward. The attack itself lasted only seconds, but the destruction left behind looked catastrophic. As the final rounds echoed across the parking lot, the shooters immediately retreated toward waiting vehicles and disappeared into the darkness before police arrived. According to detectives, the escape happened with the same coordination prosecutors say had been present throughout the entire night. Fast, controlled, organized. When officers reached the scene, they found shell casings spread across the pavement, shattered glass surrounding damaged vehicles, and victims suffering from gunshot wounds inside the parking lot. Julio Foolio was later pronounced dead. And as homicide investigators began reviewing surveillance footage from hotels, streets, businesses, and nearby intersections throughout Tampa, a terrifying picture slowly started coming together. This had not been a spontaneous confrontation between rivals crossing paths by accident. According to prosecutors, the suspects had followed Julio across the city for hours before finally cornering him at the hotel. They tracked him through clubs, monitored his movements, waited for the right location, then attacked with overwhelming firepower. For detectives working the case, one fact became impossible to ignore. This looked less like a random street shooting, and more like a planned execution. Because in less than 30 seconds, years of hatred ended in a parking lot covered in shell casings.
And in this video, you will clearly see in the evidence Mr. Davion Murphy taking full credit for his role in the shooting. That is just after his arrest.
When Tampa police officers arrived at the Home2 Suites parking lot, the scene looked like the aftermath of a battlefield. Shell casings covered the pavement, bullets had ripped through multiple vehicles, broken glass reflected police lights across the parking lot while detectives moved carefully through the crime scene trying to understand how many shooters had been involved. Almost immediately, investigators realized this was not a simple drive-by shooting. The amount of gunfire suggested coordination, multiple firing positions, multiple weapons. And fortunately for detectives, the suspects had left behind something extremely valuable: digital evidence. Security cameras from the hotel, nearby businesses, intersections, and traffic systems captured vehicles entering and leaving the area throughout the night. Detectives began collecting footage frame by frame, building a timeline of movements connected to Julio Foolio and the suspected shooters. Then came the phone data. According to prosecutors, investigators analyzed GPS records, cell tower activity, and location services tied to multiple suspects. That data allegedly showed coordinated movements between Jacksonville and Tampa during the hours leading up to the murder. Airbnb records also became critical evidence after detectives traced the rental property back to Rashad Murphy using identification documents and payment information. And the evidence kept growing. Investigators later recovered Walmart surveillance footage allegedly showing suspects purchasing items connected to the operation, including clothing and ammunition matching evidence from the crime scene. Prosecutors argued the footage helped place members of the group together before the ambush, but perhaps one of the strongest pieces of physical evidence came from Sean Gathright. During searches connected to the investigation, detectives reportedly recovered a brass catcher, a device attached to rifles, to collect shell casings during shootings. Forensic experts later testified that shell casings connected to weapons recovered during the investigation matched evidence found at the Home2 Suites parking lot. Authorities also linked AR-style rifles to the suspects through additional forensic testing and digital evidence collected throughout the case. Then investigators uncovered something even stranger. While sitting inside an interrogation room after his arrest, Devon Murphy was reportedly captured on video, pretending to fire a weapon with his hands while discussing the shooting. Prosecutors later argued the behavior reflected a disturbing lack of remorse following the murder. Piece by piece, detectives assembled the timeline. Phones, cars, weapons, Airbnb rentals, surveillance footage, GPS movements. And by the end of the investigation, prosecutors believed they were no longer looking at random street violence carried out by reckless young men. According to law enforcement, this was a coordinated assassination team operating with planning, surveillance, and organized execution.
Men found guilty for the shooting death of Jacksonville rapper Julio are expected to be sentenced. We told you Friday when the verdict came down. Sean Gathright, Isaiah Chance, Rashad Murphy, and Davion Murphy were all found guilty of first-degree murder and conspiracy. They face life in prison or the death penalty, which the prosecution is pushing for.
As the case moved into court, prosecutors made one thing immediately clear. They were not treating the murder of Julio Foolio as an ordinary gang shooting, because according to the state of Florida, this was a death penalty case. Inside the courtroom, prosecutors described the attack using the same words repeatedly throughout the proceedings: cold, calculated, premeditated. According to the prosecution, the suspects did not simply encounter Julio by chance and open fire in the heat of the moment. Detectives argued the evidence showed planning, surveillance, coordinated travel, weapon preparation, and communication between multiple people working together before the ambush ever happened. As jurors listened, prosecutors replayed surveillance footage from the Home2 Suites parking lot, showing the moments before and during the shooting. Video screens inside the courtroom displayed flashes of gunfire erupting across the parking lot while family members and spectators sat silently watching the chaos unfold again. Then came the digital evidence: phone records, GPS data, Airbnb rentals, surveillance footage, weapon analysis. Piece by piece, prosecutors attempted to show the jury what they believed was a coordinated operation rather than spontaneous street violence. At one point, prosecutors reportedly compared the movements of the suspects to a military-style mission. Different vehicles traveling separately, suspects communicating across locations, teams allegedly tracking Julio throughout Tampa before cornering him at the hotel. But defense attorneys pushed back aggressively. Lawyers representing the defendants argued that prosecutors were building theories based heavily on circumstantial evidence. Some attorneys claimed there was not enough direct evidence proving exactly who fired fatal shots during the ambush. Others argued prosecutors had failed to establish a clear personal motive for certain defendants accused of participating in the attack. Defense teams repeatedly described portions of the state's timeline as speculation, not fact. And as the courtroom battle intensified, the emotional weight inside the proceedings became impossible to ignore. Families of victims and defendants sat only feet apart, while graphic evidence, gunfire footage, and forensic testimony were presented in detail before the jury. For prosecutors, however, the overall conclusion never changed. This was not simply reckless gang violence spiraling out of control. According to the state, the evidence pointed towards something far more organized. A coordinated attack planned across multiple cities by several individuals working together toward a single objective. And by the end of the hearings, prosecutors argued one chilling idea again and again. This was no longer street violence. It was organized assassination. What makes cases like this especially disturbing is how revenge can slowly become normalized inside certain environments. According to criminologists and violence researchers, long-running gang conflicts often create a cycle where retaliation stops feeling emotional and starts feeling expected. In Jacksonville's drill culture, that cycle appeared to intensify online. Songs, diss tracks, Instagram lives, and viral videos transformed real deaths into public entertainment. Victims were mocked in lyrics. Funerals became references in music videos. And for many young men caught inside these rivalries, social media attention began rewarding the most extreme behavior. The more violent the reputation became, the more influence and recognition someone gained online. That environment can create dangerous psychological pressure, because eventually, violence stops being viewed only as revenge. It becomes identity. Experts studying drill culture have also pointed to the role of group mentality. When several people move together inside the same conflict for years, individual morality can slowly become weaker than loyalty to the group itself. Decisions that might feel horrifying alone can begin feeling justified when reinforced by friends, music, and internet validation. And perhaps the most dangerous part of all is dehumanization. Over time, rivals stop being viewed as ordinary human beings with families, childhoods, and futures. Instead, they become enemies, targets, symbols representing previous deaths and humiliation. That does not excuse the violence, but it may help explain how years of online threats, retaliation, and public disrespect eventually escalated into a coordinated killing carried out in a hotel parking lot filled with innocent people nearby. Because by the end of this war, the internet was no longer enough anymore.
He used to take my little TV on my dresser and he would turn it upside down. And I'd be like, why did you do that? And he'll just walk out. I don't know why, but he's a funny person. He's sweet, he's caring. He's always there for me when I needed him.
We heard a lot about you guys got to travel together.
Ma'am.
What did you like about traveling with your brother?
Just the fact that I got to experience new things and see the world with him was probably it's the best thing ever.
It's good memories you can carry forward.
Yeah.
Thank you for watching this documentary. If this case made you think, feel free to share your thoughts respectfully in the comments below. And if you enjoy deep true crime investigations and real criminal cases, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications for more stories like this. Stay safe, stay aware, and we'll see you in the next case.
There's a first for everything, like a hand